I found out I had no room the moment I stepped up to the front desk. Not before the trip. Not in a phone call. Not even in a text. Right there. In the lobby. With my suitcase at my feet and the entire family standing behind me like an audience that already knew how the show ended. The clerk kept typing, kept searching, kept glancing up at me with that careful, apologetic expression that people wear when they're about to deliver news they wish belonged to someone else. I watched her click through screen after screen. I watched her lips press together. I watched her finally look at me and say, very quietly, that there was no reservation under my name. I turned around. My father was studying the floor tiles. My mother was looking out at the view through the lobby windows like the ocean had suddenly become fascinating. And my sister was walking toward me from the direction of the pool bar with a drink in her hand and a smile that had been waiting for exactly this moment. She looked me up and down slowly. Then she said it. A failure doesn't deserve to travel with this family. She said it like it was obvious. Like it was something everyone in the room had already agreed on. She said it loud enough for the clerk to hear, loud enough for the couple checking in beside me to hear, loud enough for it to land in my chest and stay there. Nobody behind me said a word. That was the part that finished me. Not her voice. Their silence. I picked up my suitcase. I looked at my father. I looked at my sister. And I said, in the most level voice I had ever used in my life, then I'll leave. The smile on her face flickered. Just for a second. Just enough. I turned and walked out through the glass doors. And what none of them understood, not yet, was that I wasn't walking away from a fight. I was walking toward the end of one. My name is Jordan. I'm 32 years old. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Denver, Colorado, where I work as a freelance content strategist for technology companies. My income comes in project by project. My schedule belongs entirely to me. I do not have a corner office, a company car, or a LinkedIn title that impresses anyone at family dinners. By my family's standards, that makes me a failure. My father, Robert, is a man who measures everything in metrics. Revenue, zip codes, square footage, job titles. He built a successful real estate business over 30 years and decided somewhere along the way that his success was a moral verdict, not just a financial one. The people who succeeded were people who deserved to. The people who struggled, well, they had made choices. My sister, Vanessa, inherited his framework completely. She married a man who worked in finance, bought a house in the kind of suburb that has its own Instagram aesthetic, and posted about her life with the specific frequency of someone who needed constant external confirmation that they were winning. Then there was me. I had left a corporate marketing job 4 years ago because I was working 60 hours a week for a salary that barely covered my rent and a manager who treated burnout like a personal flaw. I had spent a year building a client base from nothing. It had been hard and frightening and entirely worth it. But my family had never seen it that way. To them, leaving a salaried job was quitting. Building something freelance was hiding. Every time I showed up to a family event without a promotion to announce or a house to describe, I could feel the slight recalibration in how they spoke to me. The questions that stopped being asked. The corners of conversations I was gently excluded from. I had learned to live with it, mostly. I had not learned to expect what happened in that lobby. The trip had been my father's idea. A Thanksgiving week vacation at a beachfront resort in Florida, paid for by my Uncle Raymond, my father's older brother, who had more money than he knew what to do with and a genuine belief that family gatherings mattered. Raymond was the one person in my extended family who treated everyone with the same basic dignity regardless of what they earned. He called me sometimes just to ask how the work was going. He remembered the names of my clients. He asked real questions and waited for real answers. I loved him without reservation. When he invited the whole family to Florida for the week, I said yes immediately. 2 weeks before the trip, my father sent out a group message with the hotel details, the flight window, and a note about dinner reservations. I read through it and noticed the room list. 1 room under my father and mother's names. 1 room under Vanessa and her husband Marcus's names. 1 room under Uncle Raymond's name. Nothing under mine. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I texted my father directly. I don't see a room booked for me. He replied 40 minutes later. It's being sorted. Just come. That was it. It's being sorted. Just come. I should have pushed harder. I know that now. But I had spent so many years trying not to be the dramatic one, the difficult one, the one who made everything about herself, that I had developed a reflex for swallowing discomfort and hoping it resolved itself. So I told myself there had been a simple oversight. I packed my suitcase. I booked my flight. I showed up. And I walked into a lobby where there was no room for me, and my sister was already holding her drink like she had arrived early specifically for this part. The Florida air was warm and heavy when I stepped outside. I sat on a bench near the resort entrance, suitcase beside me, phone open to the rideshare app. Holiday flights were expensive, but so was every minute I spent standing in that lobby while my family watched and said nothing. I was going to go to the airport, I was going to pay whatever it cost to get home, and I was going to sit with what had just happened in the privacy of my own apartment where nobody could watch my face while I processed it. I had already requested a driver when my phone rang. It was Raymond. I almost didn't answer. I was so tired of explaining myself to members of my own family. But Raymond was different. Raymond had always been different. So I picked up. Jordan. His voice was calm in a way that meant he was working to keep it that way. Where are you? Outside. I'm going to the airport. A pause. Then, stay where you are. He came out 4 minutes later in the linen blazer he always wore when he wanted to look effortlessly put together. He sat beside me on the bench without fanfare, without the performance of concern, without any of the soft, useless language people use when they want credit for caring without actually doing anything. He just sat down. And then he said, "Tell me exactly what she said." So I told him. Every word. I didn't minimize it. I didn't dress it up with context that made my sister seem more reasonable than she had been. I didn't soften my father's silence into something it wasn't. When I finished, Raymond was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the road where rideshare cars were coming and going in steady rhythm. Then he said, "People who build their whole image on borrowed comfort always panic when they meet someone who has dignity without it." I looked at him. "Don't apologize for someone else's cruelty," he said. And then he took out his phone. He made 2 calls. The first was to the hotel. The second I didn't fully hear because he stepped a few feet away, but I caught enough. His voice was still calm. It was always calm. But there was something underneath it, a specific, settled authority, that made it clear the conversation had only one possible outcome. When he came back, he said, "You have a room. Same floor as the others. I want you at dinner tomorrow night, exactly as planned." "Raymond, I don't want a confrontation." "Good," he said. The faintest trace of something moved across his face. Neither do I. I understood then that he wasn't planning a confrontation. He was planning something quieter than that, and far more permanent. I checked into my room that evening without speaking to anyone in my family. My father texted once. "Glad you stayed." No apology. No explanation. Just a one-line acknowledgement that I had not left, offered in the exact tone of a man who considered the matter closed. My sister sent a message that read, "Are you seriously going to make this a bigger deal than it is?" I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the nightstand and looked out at the water from my window for a while. The view was beautiful. The resort was genuinely beautiful. And somewhere across the hall, my family was probably having drinks and telling themselves that I had overreacted and that everything was fine now, because I was still here, which meant I had decided to be reasonable. They had never understood the difference between someone choosing to stay and someone waiting to leave on their own terms. I was still there because Raymond had asked me to be. And because something told me that what was about to happen at that Thanksgiving dinner was going to be worth sitting still for. The private dining room my uncle had reserved looked exactly like the kind of room designed to make people feel important. Long table. White candles running the full length of the center. Crystal glasses that caught the overhead lighting and sent small flashes across the walls. A pianist playing something deliberately understated in the corner. Folded place cards and neat, heavy paper stock at every seat. Vanessa arrived in a dress that photographed beautifully. Marcus walked beside her in a blazer that matched, because they always coordinated for events where other people might be watching. My mother was already seated, posture perfect, the version of herself she performed for nice dinners. My father sat at the far end, doing the thing he did in group settings where he wanted to appear magnanimous, leaning back slightly, one arm on the armrest, surveying the room like it was his. I sat down quietly. No one mentioned the lobby. No one acknowledged what had happened. They slid back into normal conversation with the practiced ease of a family that had long ago decided the most effective way to handle discomfort was to move past it so quickly that addressing it became the social offense. The appetizers came. Wine was poured. Vanessa complimented the shrimp too enthusiastically, the way she did when she was nervous and needed to fill space. Marcus asked Raymond something about Florida real estate values. My mother mentioned a property she had seen near the water, dropping it into the conversation with the specific casualness she used when she wanted to sound like someone for whom oceanfront real estate was a casual topic. I ate quietly. I watched. Raymond was at the head of the table. He had barely spoken since we sat down. He asked a question here, responded to a comment there. He seemed relaxed. He seemed, to someone who didn't know him, like a man simply enjoying Thanksgiving dinner with his family. Then the main course was cleared, and he set down his fork. He didn't tap his glass. He didn't clear his throat. He simply stopped, folded his hands on the table, and looked at the room. And the room changed. "I have supported this family for a long time," he said. His voice was the same as it always was, level, unhurried, completely without performance. Longer and in more ways than most of you have ever acknowledged out loud. Vanessa's hand stopped moving around her wine glass. My father's posture shifted. Raymond continued. "I arranged this trip because I believed the least this family owed each other was simple decency. I did not expect to spend yesterday morning watching one member of this family be publicly humiliated at a hotel front desk over a room reservation that should have existed from the beginning." He looked directly at Vanessa. She opened her mouth. I could see the mechanism engaging, the explanation, the recontextualization, The "it was just a joke" or "I was pushed to my limit" or "she takes everything so personally." It was all right there, queued up and ready. Raymond didn't let any of it out. "No," he said, simply and without heat. "You weren't joking. You were performing status at someone else's expense. In public. In front of strangers. And everyone at this table let it happen." The pianist in the corner had reached a quiet passage. The silence felt enormous. "So let me be clear about something." He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and removed a folded piece of paper. He didn't unfold it dramatically. He just placed it on the table in front of him. "Effective immediately, all discretionary financial support I have been providing to members of this family ends today." My mother said his name. Just his name. Like a warning that arrived about 20 years too late. He didn't look at her. "The monthly transfers stop. The supplemental support for private school tuition, that stops. The housing assistance arrangement I agreed to in 2021 will not be renewed, extended, or renegotiated. If the lifestyle you have built requires external funding to sustain, that funding will need to come from somewhere other than me." The blood left Vanessa's face so fast it was almost difficult to watch. Marcus spoke first, because he was the one doing math in real time and the numbers were not adding up. "Sir," he said, and his voice cracked on the word, "perhaps we should discuss this somewhere private." Raymond looked at him. Steady. Patient. Immovable. "Was what your wife said to Jordan private?" he asked. "Or was it said publicly, in a hotel lobby, in front of front desk staff and other guests?" Marcus closed his mouth. My mother leaned forward, voice tight and shaking. "This is extreme. It was a misunderstanding, Raymond. A family misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding is when truth gets lost in the gap between people," Raymond said. "Yesterday, I heard the truth very clearly. From a balcony. In full." He looked around the table slowly. "The people at this table have confused support with entitlement for a long time. Worse than that, you have mistaken borrowed comfort for personal superiority. You have spent years looking down at the one person here who actually knows how to stand on her own feet. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a character issue. And I am no longer willing to fund it." Vanessa started crying. Not quietly. The kind of crying that comes from panic, not pain, the desperate, breathless kind that happens when someone realizes that the floor they thought was solid has turned out to be paper, and they are suddenly falling through it. Her husband stared at his plate. My father, who had built his identity around being the authority in every room he entered, said nothing at all. He just sat there with his hands flat on the tablecloth, looking like a man who had just watched 30 years of carefully constructed certainty rearrange itself into something he didn't recognize. My mother had tears running down her face, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Raymond with an expression I had never seen on her before. Something between fury and a specific, devastating grief of someone who understands they have lost an argument they cannot afford to lose. I sat still through all of it. I didn't smile. I didn't look satisfied. I didn't do anything that would give anyone in that room grounds to make this about my reaction. I just sat there and felt, for the first time in as long as I could remember, entirely untouchable. Raymond picked up his wine glass. "Happy Thanksgiving," he said. Nobody touched dessert. The call started before breakfast the next morning. My mother called twice before I had finished my first cup of coffee. Then Vanessa. Then Marcus, which surprised me, because he had never called me directly in the 3 years he had been part of this family. By noon I had 11 missed calls. 6 text messages. They all circled the same request from different directions. Fix this. Talk to Raymond. Tell him he overreacted. Vanessa's text was the most illuminating. She wrote, "I cannot believe you just sat there and let him do that to us." Let him. Not, "I can't believe I said what I said." Not, "I'm sorry for humiliating you." Just pure, uncut outrage that the consequences had arrived, and that I had not intervened to stop them. That sentence told me everything I needed to know about whether she had understood anything. I flew home to Denver the next afternoon. And over the following weeks, the picture of exactly what Raymond's announcement meant began to come into focus. He was not a man who made threats. He made decisions. And when a decision was made, it stayed made. The monthly transfers stopped. I learned this because my mother mentioned, in a tightly controlled voice during a phone call 3 weeks later, that she and my father were reassessing their finances. That phrase, reassessing their finances, from two people who had spent decades presenting financial ease as a personal virtue, landed with a weight she probably didn't intend. But it was Vanessa's situation that deteriorated the fastest. The private school tuition had been quietly covered by Raymond for 2 years, a fact that had apparently not been shared with anyone outside the immediate arrangement. When it stopped, the school began sending notices that Vanessa and Marcus suddenly had to handle on their own. Given the way they had structured their finances, aggressively, with the implicit assumption that the external support was permanent, they did not have the flexibility to absorb it easily. Marcus emailed me 4 days after I returned home. It was, in its strange and fumbling way, the most honest piece of communication anyone in my family had sent me in years. He wrote that they were in a difficult position. That they had made decisions based on stability they had taken for granted. That Vanessa was not sleeping. That the bank had questions about their mortgage that he wasn't sure how to answer. He ended by asking whether I thought, given enough time, Raymond might reconsider. I read the email twice. Then I closed it without replying. Not because I wanted them to suffer. Not because I felt nothing for the stress they were under. But because I understood something that Marcus apparently didn't. Raymond's decision had nothing to do with me. I hadn't asked him to do anything. I hadn't called him after the lobby and lobbied for financial consequences. I had simply told him the truth when he asked for it. What he did with that truth was his choice, made according to his own values. My responding to Marcus as though I had a lever that could reverse it would have been its own kind of lie. My mother tried a different strategy over the following weeks. First anger, she called and told me I had turned Raymond against the family, that I had chosen an outsider over my own blood, that I was the one tearing things apart. When that didn't produce the reaction she wanted, she shifted to grief. She called crying, describing Vanessa's panic, my niece's confusion, the stress on everyone's marriage. Listening to her was like hearing someone describe a house fire while consistently forgetting to mention who dropped the match. Finally, I said, "I didn't do this." The silence on the other end of the line was long and loaded. "I know," she said eventually. And the way she said it, flat, reluctant, like the admission had cost her something, told me she had known all along, and that knowing it made her angrier than the alternative would have. The news about my niece reached me through a cousin who had no idea she was delivering information that mattered. She mentioned, in passing, during a casual video call, that Lily had transferred to a different school. Public school. At the end of the previous term. I sat with that for a while. Not with satisfaction. With something more complicated. Lily was 9 years old. She had done nothing wrong. She was being moved between schools because the adults in her life had built a life on a foundation they didn't actually own, and the foundation had been removed. That was not something I could feel good about. What I did feel, was a kind of tired clarity. Vanessa's social media had gone quiet around the same time. The stream of carefully curated content that had once moved at a steady pace, the brunch photos, the holiday reels, the captions about gratitude and family and a life lived intentionally, had simply stopped. No announcement. No explanation. Just silence where the performance used to be. It was strange how quickly the image dissolved when the infrastructure under it disappeared. My mother left me a voicemail one Friday evening. She said Vanessa was falling apart. She said Lily was confused. She said she understood I was hurt, but surely, for the sake of the child, I could do something. Talk to Raymond. Ask him to reconsider. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. I had spent 32 years being asked to be the bigger person. Being the one who let things go. Being the one who understood. Being the one who swallowed the insult because making peace was more important than making noise. I called her back. I said, I can't fix something I didn't break. She inhaled sharply. Like the words had landed physically. But I want to be clear, I was not cruel. I was not angry, not in the way I had been in the lobby, not in the way I had been in the months before when the slow accumulation of dismissal had built up into something I didn't know how to process. I was simply finished. And there is a difference between cruel and finished. A very important one. Winter in Denver was cold that year. Not unusually cold, just the ordinary, reliable cold of a city that sits at altitude and doesn't apologize for its weather. I leaned into it. I bought a better coat. I started working earlier in the mornings before the city woke up properly, when the apartment was quiet and my thinking was the clearest. My work was going well. Genuinely, sustainably well. A software company I had worked with for 6 months on a project basis offered me a long-term contract. A second client expanded my role after a campaign I had built from scratch outperformed every benchmark they had set. My income for the year landed significantly higher than any salary I had earned in the corporate world, and more importantly, it felt real. Not borrowed. Not performed. Real. I updated my financial tracking spreadsheet on a Sunday afternoon and saw a number I had once written down as a distant goal, the kind you write because you need something to aim at, not because you actually believe it's coming. It was there. In a column labeled actual, not projected. Nobody knew. I didn't post it. I didn't call anyone. I just sat with it at my kitchen counter with my coffee getting cold beside me and felt the specific, unperformable satisfaction of something built by hand finally holding the weight you designed it for. Raymond called the following week. He called regularly now, which was new, or maybe not new, maybe just finally possible without the layer of family performance between us. He asked about the work. He asked about the apartment. He asked, in the way only he did, whether I was thinking big enough about what came next. You know what your sister never understood, he said, during one of those calls. I waited. She thought success was whatever made strangers envy you the fastest. She had confused speed for substance her whole life. Everything I gave her just let her move faster towards something that was always going to collapse. He paused. Real success is what still stands after the applause leaves. I wrote that sentence down after we hung up. I still have it. The message from Vanessa arrived on a Tuesday evening in early February. I was making pasta. One earbud in, half listening to a podcast, completely unprepared for what appeared on my screen. It was a text. Not a call. The fact that she chose text told me something. She didn't trust herself with my voice, or didn't trust what I might say, or both. And it wasn't one of her usual polished messages either. There was no careful phrasing, no protective distance built into the language. It said, "I've been thinking about what I said at the hotel. I know sorry doesn't undo it. But I've thought about it every day since." I stood at my stove and read those words 3 times. I had imagined this moment before. Not obsessively, but occasionally, the way you sometimes imagine a conversation you've needed to happen for years and rehearse different versions of your response. In most of those imagined versions, I had said something precise and perfectly weighted. Something that communicated exactly how much damage had been done without letting her off the hook too easily. I typed 3 words. I know. Thanks. Then I put my phone in my pocket and finished making dinner. I want to be honest about what that text from Vanessa was and what it wasn't. It was not repair. One text does not repair years of accumulated dismissal and one devastating public insult. Real repair is slower than that. It requires repeated changed behavior, not just a single moment of remorse that arrives conveniently after consequences have landed. I did not know yet whether Vanessa was capable of that kind of sustained change. I genuinely didn't know. But I also understood something I couldn't have articulated a year earlier. I did not need her to become a better person before I was allowed to be okay. I did not need my father's acknowledgement. I did not need my mother's apology. I did not need the family to revise their assessment of my worth or formally recant the years of quiet and not so quiet messaging that I was the lesser one, the disappointing one, the one who had made wrong choices and was living the appropriate consequences. I had needed those things once. I had carried the need for them for a long time, shaped around it the way you shape yourself around something heavy you've been carrying so long you forget it isn't part of you. And then I stood in a hotel lobby with no room and no defense from the people who were supposed to be my family, and I walked out, and I kept going, and somewhere in the months that followed, between the contract that came through and the spreadsheet number that finally landed where I had aimed it and the Sunday mornings in my own apartment that felt genuinely mine, I had set the weight down. I hadn't even noticed it happening. The power my family had held over me for years wasn't actually power. It had just looked like it because I kept treating their approval like a currency I needed to earn. The moment I stopped trying to earn it, the whole system lost its grip. They had controlled who belonged, who got a room, who got a seat at the table, who deserved to travel with the family. They had handed down verdicts about my worth based on metrics I had never agreed to and then wondered why I couldn't stop trying to argue my way out of the ruling. What I understood now, what the lobby had finally made undeniable, was that a verdict only has power while you consent to the court. I had stopped consenting. And once I stopped, everything they had built on top of my compliance had started to slowly, quietly, come apart. Not because of anything dramatic I had done. Not because I had planned it or engineered it or called in favors or constructed a revenge strategy. But because Raymond had been watching from a balcony, and he had asked me to tell him the truth, and I had told it without editing. The truth, left unedited, had done the rest. My old suitcase is still at the back of my closet. It's nothing impressive. A mid-range brand with a broken zipper pull I replaced with a carabiner clip because replacing the pull was easier than buying a new one. There are scuff marks along one corner from an airport baggage carousel years ago. Nothing about it would photograph well or signal anything to anyone about where I had been or where I was going. I love it for exactly that reason. The last time I wheeled it through a hotel lobby, a woman looked me in the eyes in a place designed to make people feel welcome and told me I didn't deserve to be there. I pulled that same suitcase out of my closet last month. I booked a week in Portugal, Lisbon and then the coast. A small rental near the water that had good light in the mornings and a kitchen where I could make coffee and work at my own pace and decide every day exactly what the day would look like. I booked it on a Tuesday afternoon between client calls. It took about 20 minutes. No one was consulted. No one had to agree. No group text went out with itinerary details and room lists where my name might or might not appear. Just a confirmation email. My name on it. My card. My reservation. There was a room. There would always be a room. Because I was the one booking it. That is what success looks like from where I stand. Not a title. Not a zip code. Not a social media feed that requires external funding to keep looking like something it isn't. Just a life I built myself, in a room I paid for, going somewhere I chose, with a suitcase that belongs to me. Nobody can take a place from you when you are the one who bought the ticket. And that, after everything, sounds exactly like what I deserve. If you have ever been the person left off the room list, if you know what it costs to be the one who always understands, always adjusts, always makes it easier for everyone else, this one is for you. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one.